Deep in the rugged mountain ranges of northwest Pakistan, something remarkable is taking shape. Tens of thousands of workers are racing against time, pouring concrete, drilling through ancient rock, and reshaping an entire river system. Their mission? To build what could become one of South Asia's most strategically important infrastructure projects, a massive hydroelectric power station worth $2.2 billion. This isn't just another dam. This is a project that promises to transform Pakistan's chronic energy crisis, secure water resources for millions, and shift the delicate balance of power in one of the world's most volatile regions. But there's a reason why this construction site, located hundreds of miles from any border, has become a source of growing anxiety in New Delhi. Today, we're diving deep into the story of Pakistan's Mohmand Dam, a mega-project that represents hope for one nation and a strategic headache for another. We'll explore why Pakistan desperately needed this facility, how Chinese engineers overcame seemingly impossible challenges to build it, and why India views its completion as a direct threat to its regional influence. If you're interested in geopolitics, infrastructure, and the hidden battles over resources that shape our world, you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our in-depth analysis of global events that mainstream media often overlooks. Let's begin. Pakistan stands as South Asia's second most populous nation, home to approximately 240 million people. That's roughly the combined population of Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. With such an enormous population comes an equally enormous appetite for electricity, power needed to run factories, hospitals, schools, homes, and the countless devices that define modern life. In 2023 alone, Pakistan consumed over 104,000 gigawatt-hours of electricity. To put that in perspective, that's enough energy to power every household in California for nearly 2 years. Yet here's the troubling reality. Even this massive consumption falls dramatically short of what the country actually needs. Walk through any Pakistani city during the scorching summer months, and you'll witness a crisis that has become painfully routine. Rolling blackouts sweep through neighborhoods like clockwork. In the capital, Islamabad, where diplomats, government officials, and business leaders work, electricity can disappear for hours at a time during peak summer heat. Air conditioners go silent just when temperatures soar past 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Traffic lights blink out, creating chaos at busy intersections. Life simply stops and waits for the grid to come back online. But Islamabad's residents are actually the fortunate ones. Venture into Pakistan's rural regions, and the situation becomes far more desperate. Current estimates suggest that roughly 40% of Pakistan's population lacks access to reliable electricity. That's nearly 100 million people, more than the entire population of Germany, who cannot count on having power when they need it. Farmers cannot reliably pump water for irrigation. Students study by candlelight or kerosene lamps. Small businesses operate at the mercy of unpredictable power supply. The numbers paint a stark picture. Pakistan faces an electricity deficit exceeding 5,000 megawatts. On average, the nation experiences 4 to 6 hours of load shedding, planned power cuts, every single day. In some regions, particularly during summer peaks, blackouts can stretch for 12 hours or more. The economic toll is staggering. Analysts estimate that Pakistan loses approximately 5% of its entire gross domestic product annually due to energy shortages. 5% might sound abstract, but we're talking about billions of dollars in lost productivity, shuttered factories, spoiled goods, and missed opportunities. Industries cannot operate at full capacity. Foreign investors hesitate to commit capital when they cannot guarantee consistent power for their operations. Perhaps most troubling are the healthcare implications. Hospitals across Pakistan must maintain diesel generators as backup systems because power failures during critical surgeries or life support situations can mean the difference between life and death. Yet fuel for these generators is expensive. draining already limited medical budgets that could otherwise go toward medicine, equipment, or staff. So what caused this crisis? Why can't a nation of 240 million people keep the lights on? The answer is complicated, but it starts with geography and the legacy of decisions made decades ago. Pakistan's energy challenges are intrinsically tied to water, specifically to the Indus River system, one of the world's longest and most vital waterways. This ancient river and its tributaries have sustained civilizations for thousands of years, providing the water that makes life possible in an otherwise harsh landscape. Traditionally, Pakistan has relied heavily on hydroelectric power generated from the Indus Basin. It makes perfect sense. The country has limited fossil fuel reserves, and the massive volume of water flowing through mountainous terrain creates ideal conditions for hydropower generation. One of the region's largest facilities is the Baglihar Dam, a substantial hydroelectric project with an installed capacity of 969 megawatts, enough to power hundreds of thousands of homes. But here's the catch. Baglihar Dam isn't on Pakistani soil. It's controlled by India. This seemingly simple fact carries enormous strategic implications. The Indus River and several of its major tributaries originate in or flow through territory controlled by India before reaching Pakistan. This geographical reality means that India sits upstream, possessing what security analysts call hydrohegemony, the ability to control water flow to downstream nations. For Pakistan, this creates an existential vulnerability. A significant portion of the water that keeps Pakistani farms irrigated, cities supplied, and turbines spinning ultimately flows from territory beyond Pakistan's control. If relations between India and Pakistan deteriorate, and they frequently do, New Delhi possesses a weapon that requires no soldiers, no missiles, no overt military action. It just needs to close some gates. The Indus Waters Treaty, signed in 1960 and brokered by the World Bank, was supposed to prevent exactly this scenario. The treaty allocated the waters of 3 eastern rivers to India and 3 western rivers to Pakistan, establishing what many considered a model for international water-sharing agreements. For decades, despite multiple wars and constant tension, both nations largely respected this framework. But respect for the treaty has eroded in recent years. India now operates at least 12 major dams on the western tributaries of the Indus system, rivers that, according to the treaty, should flow largely unobstructed to Pakistan. While India argues these projects comply with treaty provisions allowing run-of-river hydroelectric facilities and limited storage, Pakistan views each new dam as a potential choke point. The situation reached a critical point in May of this year when India's Ministry of Water Resources announced suspension of certain treaty mechanisms. Almost immediately, satellite imagery revealed a coordinated reduction in water flow from multiple Indian facilities. 6 major sluice gates in the Jammu region closed simultaneously, causing river levels in Pakistan's Punjab province to drop by nearly 90% in some locations. The impact was immediate and severe. Approximately 4 million acres of wheat fields faced drought conditions seemingly overnight. The Chenab River, normally a robust waterway, saw its riverbed crack and dry within days. Farmers watched helplessly as crops that had been thriving suddenly withered. The specter of famine, rarely discussed in 21st century geopolitics, became a very real possibility for millions of Pakistanis whose livelihoods depend on consistent irrigation. India eventually eased the restrictions after international pressure and bilateral negotiations, but the message had been sent and received. New Delhi possesses leverage that goes beyond conventional military might. In an era where climate change is already stressing water resources across South Asia, the ability to weaponize rivers represents a uniquely powerful form of coercion. For Pakistan's government and military planners, this incident underscored an uncomfortable truth. No matter how many soldiers they deployed, no matter how sophisticated their weapons systems became, Their nation's survival depended on water sources they didn't control. Something had to change. Long before the recent water crisis, Pakistani officials recognized the strategic vulnerability inherent in their downstream position. For years, they had studied the Swat River, a significant tributary flowing through Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province in the northwest, as a potential site for major hydroelectric development. The Swat River possessed nearly perfect characteristics for such a project. Substantial water volume, dramatic elevation changes creating natural pressure for turbines, and a location entirely within Pakistani territory beyond India's reach. Engineers had mapped the terrain, calculated the potential output, and drafted preliminary designs for what could become Pakistan's largest domestically controlled hydropower facility. There was just one problem. Pakistan couldn't afford to build it. Conservative estimates placed the project cost at $1.5 billion, potentially rising to $2 billion or beyond once the full complexity of construction in remote mountainous terrain was factored in. For a nation already struggling with chronic budget deficits, mounting debt obligations, and an economy that seemed perpetually on the brink of crisis, committing such resources to a single infrastructure project seemed impossible. Beyond financing, there was the question of technical capability. Building a dam of this scale requires specialized engineering expertise, advanced construction equipment, experience managing complex logistics in challenging environments, and the ability to solve unexpected problems that inevitably emerge when you're essentially redesigning geography. Pakistan had built smaller dams before, but nothing approaching this magnitude or complexity. This is where China entered the story. The relationship between China and Pakistan has often been described as all-weather friendship, diplomatic language suggesting a partnership that endures regardless of circumstances. But beyond the rhetoric, China has demonstrated consistent willingness to back Pakistan with concrete support, particularly in infrastructure development. Over the previous 2 decades, Chinese companies had built or upgraded ports, highways, power stations, and telecommunications networks throughout Pakistan. These projects weren't charity. They aligned with China's broader Belt and Road Initiative, creating infrastructure corridors connecting Chinese markets to the Arabian Sea, while strengthening a strategic ally that shares a border with China's western provinces. Still, the scale of assistance China was willing to provide for the Mohmand Dam project was remarkable. In September 2019, after months of technical evaluations and negotiations, representatives from both nations signed a cooperation agreement that would reshape Pakistan's energy landscape. The deal was worth $1.7 billion initially, though costs would eventually rise to approximately $2.2 billion as the project's scope expanded. Here's what made the agreement extraordinary. China would fund roughly 90% of the total cost. Pakistan would contribute only a small fraction, essentially receiving a massive infrastructure project at a discount that no commercial lender would ever consider offering. Within 3 months of signing, China mobilized resources on a scale rarely seen outside wartime logistics operations. More than 200 specialized engineers and technicians, experts in dam construction, hydroelectric systems, geological survey, and heavy construction management, departed for Pakistan. Simultaneously, hundreds of pieces of massive construction equipment began arriving at Pakistani ports. Excavators weighing tens of tons, specialized drilling rigs, concrete mixing facilities, and the sophisticated machinery required to move mountains, literally. The Chinese team knew they were facing a monumental challenge, but they had experience. Chinese companies had built some of the world's most impressive dams, including the Three Gorges Dam, currently the world's largest power station by installed capacity. They had mastered the art of hydroelectric construction on a scale and speed that made Western firms seem cautious by comparison. Now they would bring that expertise to Pakistan's rugged northwest. When the Chinese engineering teams first surveyed the construction site along the Swat River, They encountered conditions that would have seemed insurmountable just a generation earlier. The proposed dam location sat in a narrow canyon where the river carved through ancient geological formations. The terrain was spectacular: towering cliffs, dramatic rock faces, the kind of landscape that inspires awe in travelers. But for engineers trying to build critical infrastructure, it was a nightmare scenario. Geological surveys revealed fractured rock formations riddled with fault lines and weaknesses. The mountains themselves were unstable in places, prone to rock slides and difficult to anchor. Heavy equipment couldn't simply drive to the construction site. Roads had to be carved from cliff sides first. The region experienced frequent rainfall, creating constant risks of flash flooding and mudslides that could wipe out months of work in hours. The first major task was river diversion, redirecting the Swat River so construction could proceed on what would normally be the riverbed. This is standard practice for dam building, but nothing about the conditions here was standard. Chinese teams used over 100 tons of explosives in carefully orchestrated blasting operations, breaking apart massive rock formations that blocked the planned diversion channels. The precision required was extraordinary. Blast too much and you destabilize the surrounding mountains. Blast too little and you waste time and resources. Expert demolition teams calculated each explosive placement to within centimeters, ensuring that rock broke along predictable fracture lines. Once broken, the stone still had to be cleared. Specialized crushing equipment pulverized boulders into smaller aggregates suitable for eventual use in concrete production. Nothing was wasted. The mountains themselves would ultimately form part of the dam's foundation. To manage the weather risks, engineers implemented a satellite-based early warning system using China's Beidou navigation satellite network. Ground sensors monitored rainfall, soil moisture, and slope stability in real time, feeding data to command centers where teams could instantly assess danger levels. When the system detected approaching severe weather, construction workers received immediate alerts on mobile devices, allowing them to evacuate to safety before conditions became hazardous. After nearly 12 months of intensive preparation and construction, in August 2022, the Chinese engineering team successfully diverted the Swat River. Water that had flowed along the same path for millennia now followed a temporary channel, leaving the original riverbed dry and ready for the foundation of Pakistan's future energy security. But diverting the river was just the beginning. Construction of the dam itself presented challenges that tested even the experienced Chinese teams. The region experiences temperature extremes that make consistent construction work nearly impossible without specialized equipment and techniques. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the canyon, creating conditions where exposed metal becomes too hot to touch, and concrete can cure improperly if not carefully managed. Workers face genuine health risks from heat exhaustion and dehydration. Then winter arrives, bringing the opposite problem. Heavy snowfall can close mountain roads for weeks at a time, cutting off the construction site from supply chains. Temperatures plunge, making certain types of construction work impossible and creating logistical nightmares for maintaining worker housing and safety. To overcome these seasonal challenges, engineers employed some remarkably sophisticated technology. Unmanned heavy equipment, remotely operated rollers and compactors, performed precision work under guidance from Beidou satellite positioning. These machines could achieve compaction accuracy within 2 millimeters, ensuring consistent density throughout the dam structure even when human workers would have struggled in extreme heat or cold. The dam's foundation presented its own unique complications. The riverbed contained a 94-meter-thick layer of loose sediment and fractured rock, essentially unstable material that would never support a structure as massive as the planned dam. Engineers implemented a dual-solution approach. First, constructing a deep concrete cutoff wall to prevent water seepage, then injecting specialized grout under high pressure to fill voids and stabilize the substrate. This curtain grouting technique essentially creates an artificial bedrock capable of bearing enormous weight. Environmental considerations also shape the construction approach, though for reasons beyond simple regulatory compliance. The Chinese and Pakistani teams recognized that local support for the project depended on demonstrating respect for the region's ecology. Teams planted thousands of trees in disturbed areas, established fish hatcheries to preserve aquatic species, and implemented water quality monitoring to ensure construction sediment didn't devastate downstream ecosystems. Critics might view such measures as mere public relations, but they served practical purposes too. A dam that triggers ecological collapse ultimately undermines its own purpose. Irrigation and water supply depend on healthy watersheds. Plus, in a region where anti-government sentiment can easily tip into active resistance, maintaining positive local relationships wasn't optional. As construction progressed through 2023 and into 2024, the project moved from groundwork to the dramatic phase, the dam itself rising from the canyon floor. The completed Mohmand Dam will be an engineering achievement worthy of attention by any standard. The design calls for a concrete face rock-filled dam, a hybrid construction approach that combines the strength of carefully compacted rock with the waterproof qualities of reinforced concrete. The dam will stand 213 meters tall, roughly equivalent to a 70-story building rising from the canyon floor. Its length will span 717 meters across the gorge, with a crest width of 12 meters, wide enough to accommodate maintenance vehicles and monitoring equipment. The scale becomes clearer when you consider the raw materials involved. Millions of cubic meters of rock and earth, thousands of tons of steel reinforcement, and enough concrete to build a small city will all combine to form a structure designed to withstand not just the constant pressure of billions of tons of water, but also the seismic activity common in this geologically active region. Once complete, the Mohmand facility will possess a total installed generation capacity of 800 megawatts, notably more than India's Baglihar Dam. Those 800 megawatts translate to an expected annual output of approximately 2.9 billion kilowatt-hours of electricity, enough to meet the complete energy needs of roughly 1.5 million households. To put that in perspective, we're talking about providing reliable power to a population equivalent to that of Philadelphia or Phoenix, cities where residents take constant electricity completely for granted. In Pakistan's context, it means 1.5 million families where children can study after sunset, where small businesses can operate refrigeration and machinery, where hospitals can function without depending on temperamental generators. But electricity generation, while crucial, represents only one dimension of the dam's value. The reservoir created behind the dam will hold approximately 1.8 billion cubic meters of water. Imagine a cube nearly a mile on each side, completely full. This massive storage capacity serves multiple critical functions beyond power generation. First, it provides drinking water security. The facility is designed to deliver 150 million cubic meters of treated water annually to surrounding communities, finally bringing reliable, clean water to regions that have struggled with contamination and scarcity for generations. Second, it enables agricultural expansion and intensification. Engineers estimate the dam can provide consistent irrigation water for approximately 20,000 hectares of farmland. That's roughly 49,000 acres, or about 76 square miles of crops. In a nation where food security remains precarious and where recent floods have devastated agricultural regions, this expanded farming capacity could mean the difference between self-sufficiency and dependence on food imports. Third, and perhaps most strategically important, the reservoir provides flood control. The Swat River and its tributaries have repeatedly caused devastating floods, most notably the catastrophic 2010 floods that displaced 20 million people. By regulating water flow, the dam can absorb flood surges and release water in controlled amounts, protecting downstream communities and infrastructure. From a purely economic standpoint, Analysts project the Mohmand Dam will generate direct annual revenues exceeding $400 million through electricity sales alone. Factor in reduced spending on imported fossil fuels, agricultural productivity gains, and prevented flood damage, and the project's economic impact could well exceed $1 billion annually. On paper, it's a transformational project. But projects this significant always carry consequences that extend far beyond engineering specifications and economic projections. And those consequences have not gone unnoticed in New Delhi. To understand India's concerns about the Mohmand Dam, you need to appreciate the strategic calculus that has governed South Asian water politics for decades. India currently controls approximately 65% of the total water flow in the Indus River basin, a dominance derived purely from geography. The headwaters and upper reaches of most major tributaries flow through Indian-controlled territory. This upstream position has historically provided India with enormous leverage in its perpetually tense relationship with Pakistan. Before Mohmand, India had constructed at least 12 significant dams on the western tributaries of the Indus system, the Jhelum and Chenab rivers in particular. While India maintains these facilities comply with Indus Waters Treaty provisions, their existence means India possesses multiple control points where it can, if it chooses, significantly reduce downstream flow to Pakistan. Think of it like this. Imagine your home's water supply came entirely from pipes that ran through your hostile neighbor's property first.